Welcome ladies and gentlemen to a Nomad in Gameland. This is a video guide on a quick and easy way to beat the entirety of the game, Inscryption. I do also have a couple of videos out which show me beating the game using the very same advice. So if you want to check those out, I'll put a link in the corner of the screen. Now I'm afraid there will be some spoilers in this video, but I'll do my best to minimize these and to only show you the things that you need to know in order to beat the game quickly and easily. Anyway, let's jump straight to it, and I'll start with the basics of how to play the game. If you already know the basics and want to jump ahead to the strategies, please feel free to skip to the next part of this video. So, Inscryption is a deck building game where you use your cards to battle it out against your opponent. If you've seen or played Yu-Gi-Oh! Or something similar, then you should be pretty familiar with the concept. At the beginning of the game, you'll only have access to beast cards. The majority of these cards can only be summoned by sacrificing other cards, but the most common exception here are squirrel cards. Squirrel cards can be placed on the board for free. If we have another card which requires one sacrifice to be summoned, we can then use these squirrel cards as a sacrifice to summon that card. Better cards typically require more sacrifices to be summoned, and the way we manage to do this is by drawing more cards. We can see how many sacrifices are required to summon a particular card by looking at how many blood drops they have on the top. 2 blood drops on the top of the card means that a card requires 2 sacrifices to be played. Except for your very first turn, you'll have the opportunity to draw 1 new card every turn. And you'll have access to 2 different decks to draw from. The first of these decks is just filled with squirrels. The other deck is going to be filled with your attacking cards. You'll likely need a combination of both of these cards as you play the game. If you have too many attacking cards and not enough cards on the board, you won't actually be able to make the sacrifices you need to play them. If you have too many squirrels, you won't be attacking the opponent. And on that note, let's talk about how we attack, defend, and win. Each card will come with an attack value and HP or hit points, even squirrels, which has an attack value of 0 and 1 HP. On your turn, all the cards you play will attack, and on your opponent's turn, all their cards will attack you. If a card attacks another card, the attack value of that card will reduce the opposing card's HP, and if the attack value is higher than the opposing card's HP, the defending card will die. Right, so how do you actually win? Well, you need to score some points. In order for points to be scored, a player needs to be attacked directly. To attack the opponent directly, you need one of your cards to attack, and for there nothing to be blocking such attack. When that happens, you'll score points equal to the attacking value of that card. So if a card has an attack value of 2 and hits the opponent directly, you'll score 2 points. And vice versa, if an opposing card with 2 attacks you directly, they will score 2 points. The game uses a scale to keep score, with 5 points on each side. Each game starts at a middle point of 0. If you hit the opponent directly for 2, the scale will move over to +2. If the opponent then hits you directly for 3, the scale will move the other way by 3 and the score will be -1. In order to win, you need to get the scale to +5. If the scale reaches -5, then you'll lose. With all that out of the way, there's realistically only 3 types of move that you might play. The first is to play a card to attack the opponent directly, so in a way where there's no card opposing it, and this will score points. The second type of move is to play a card to attack an opponent's card, either to destroy it or at least damage it. And the last way is to play a card to block an opponent's card. Sometimes it makes sense to play a card only to avoid getting hit directly, and this doesn't necessarily mean playing a card with high HP. In most circumstances, a card can only attack another card or you directly. It can't do both. What this means is, where a card has a high attack value, let's say 4, and you play a squirrel to oppose it, which has 1 HP, yes, the squirrel will get destroyed, but it prevents that card from attacking you directly. The high attack value won't overspill to attack you directly for 3. This is a great way to buy you time. However, overflow damage, where an attack is higher than the opposing card's HP, can be useful to you, and only you, and I'll explain why. The opponent's side of the board has an extra row. What will happen is that this higher row will show you what the opponent will play on its next turn, and you can plan on how to deal with that accordingly. However, if an opponent's card is in the way of a card it plans to play, that card won't be able to drop down and be played. If this top row card is strong and one we'd rather avoid, we can avoid destroying the bottom row card so that the top row card is blocked, or we can utilize overflow damage. If we attack the bottom row card and destroy it, any excess damage will overflow to a card above it. So let's say there's a bottom row card with 1 HP and a top row card with 2 HP. If we play a card with 2 attack, it will have 1 more attack than is needed to destroy the bottom row card. Any excess damage we use against that bottom row card will overflow onto the top row card. So the excess damage of 1 will hit the top row card and reduces HP to 1. And if there's a bottom row card with 1 HP and a top row card with 1 HP as well, if we attack for 2, then both of those cards will be destroyed. Only we can use this overflow mechanic since we don't have 2 roads, only the opponent does, so it's not something that we need to worry about defensively. So returning to the types of moves you can play, blocking can be useful not only to prevent high direct damage, but also to prevent direct damage where you're purposefully trying to block a lane to stop a stronger card from dropping down from the top row. Right, let's go back to the types of cards. In addition to the attack values and HP, which all cards have, cards can also have sigils. What these are specific traits that are mostly positive but can be detrimental from time to time. For example, a card with the airborne sigil will attack the opponent directly rather than the card opposing it. That is unless the card opposing it has the Mighty Leap sigil, which will allow that card to defend against airborne attacks. Sigils are really important as they can significantly change how your cards and the opponent's cards will act, so I recommend getting familiar with as many of them as you can by opening the rulebook. The last thing I want to discuss on the topic of cards is tribes, but I call them types. The majority of cards will belong to a particular tribe. For example, the wolf is part of the canine tribe, or as I like to say, it's a wolf type card. You can see what type a card is by looking at this little shadow symbol on each one. This is not massively important, but it is worth remembering as I'll touch upon it later. Now outside of battles, you'll be progressing down a path with a series of events. You may have a chance to choose which path you take, so it's helpful to know what each event is. Some of these will give you a random card to choose from, or a random card from a particular tribe. Some of these events are obviously battles, and there are 3 types of battle events. There are regular battles, boss battles, and battles where the opponent has a totem. The way totems work is that they allow all of a particular type of card, or a tribe of card, to have a sigil for the entirety of the battle. Which sigil they have will depend on what's on the totem. You'll have the opportunity to get your own totem later in the game. Now depending on how things are going, it might be worth avoiding totem battles if you can. The big events to remember are random card choice that isn't limited by tribe or cost, the build totem event, the mysterious stones which allows you to transfer a sigil from one card to another, the backpack which gives you up to 3 items to use during battles, and the campfire which will either boost the attack or HP of one of your cards. The very last thing I want to go over before we start talking strategy is the room. Very soon after starting the game, you'll be able to leave the table and walk around the room. There are a bunch of secrets here for you to discover, and some of these will help us in battles, but others are essential to progress the plot. I'm only going to mention those things that are essential to progress the plot, and some which are too useful to ignore. However, there still are a fair few that I won't mention, so feel free to discover them at your leisure. Right, I think that rounds up all the basic mechanics of the game. Now let's actually start, shall we? Now, while there is a certain amount of knowledge and skill needed to beat the game, the reality is that there's also an element of luck. We can't control whether we get lucky with the cards we collect on the path, or what cards we get dealt in our hands on turn 1, so don't worry too much if you don't manage to win every single time. What we can do though, is try to mitigate against bad luck as much as humanly possible. In the battles themselves, your primary focus should always be the scales. As long as you can get the scales to +5, it doesn't matter what cards the opponent has or how much they'll hit you for after that turn. On the flip side, it doesn't matter what great cards you have in your hand or what you're going to play next turn, if the opponent's going to hit you and take the scales to -5, you'll have lost before you have the chance to attack. Always focus on the scales. The last tip I have here is to favour cheaper cards over more expensive ones. Yes, the more expensive cards are usually better, but it pays to be quick in this game. This is because the board is almost always empty on the first turn, and if you can hit hard and quickly on that turn, the opponent might not be able to recover in time to actually respond effectively. I suggest focusing on being quick and offensive. Don't play for the long game, except maybe you might want to be a bit more defensive against the bosses. Anyway, enough yammering, let's start the game. I'll be starting from the tutorial, so right at the very beginning. If you want to follow this guide as much as possible, you can reset your save like this, and you can start again so that we line up. So, as soon as you beat the first battle, which is the tutorial, you'll proceed to the next event where you'll be able to pick a new card. I'd recommend taking the cat for reasons I'll explain later. The way the cat works is that once it's summoned, you can use it as a sacrifice, but it will remain on the board. You can then use it as a sacrifice again and again, I believe up to 9 times, because you know, cats have 9 lives. One of the 2 next matches will be designed to make you lose. Once you lose that battle, you'll be asked to get up and get some candles. Before you do that though, the first thing you need to do is to go over to the other candles, there's 3 of them behind the mysterious stranger, and extinguish one of the flames. You should see some smoke come out and collect in this glass. After that, and only after that, go and grab the other candles and sit back down. Now along the path you'll get some more opportunities to collect cards. For the first of these picks, I suggest you take the Wolf Cub. It's a cheap card and it will turn into a 3/2 wolf after 1 turn. You'll then have a Mysterious Stones event which will allow you to transfer a sigil from one card to another. Transfer the many live sigils from the cat onto the Wolf Cub. If you do this, you'll be able to use your Wolf Cub as a sacrifice to summon other cards without actually destroying it. And this will also work once that Wolf Cub's turned into a wolf. For the other random card picks, I suggest going for the Wolf if available, but if it's not available, just go for the one that's cheapest to summon. Aside from the other random card picks, the other events available to you should be 2 campfires, which will allow you to boost your cards. On the first campfire, you should boost the attack of one of your wolves. On the second campfire event, if you get the jaws, so the opportunity to boost the attack of a card, upgrade the other wolf, so the one that you haven't previously boosted. If you get the heart symbol, have a look at the cards that cost 1 sacrifice to summon, other than the Stoat or the Wolf Cub, and choose that one. Now I'm afraid it's time to die. In fact, we should die twice in order to complete this part of the game. So go to the boss battle and just keep skipping the turns until you lose. You'll have a cutscene where you're dragged into a room. What will happen now is that the mysterious stranger is going to make a death card. And this is the main reason we took some of the choices we did. This guy is going to use the cards in our hand as a basis to make another card. First he'll determine what the cost of this card should be, then what power it should have, and then what sigils it should have. What we wanted to do is to minimize the cost of this card to maximize its power and to get the best sigils. That's why it's just as important to avoid certain cards here than it is to select them. When it comes to the cost, we want to pick the lowest one possible. But let's say one of the options is a card with a high attack value, like that of the wolf, or is a Wolf Cub which has great sigils. We want to pick the other card, even if it's expensive. Then after that pick, we want to maximize the power. That's why we didn't put all the campfire upgrades onto just one wolf. We wanted to spread them out to increase the odds that we got at least one of them. Then we can pick the best sigils. If we can get the Wolf Cub here, then that's a great pick. Now if you're lucky enough to draw the Mantis card earlier in the random card events, Bifurcated Strike from the Mantis is one of the best sigils you can get. Don't get too hung up on this section though. We can try to maximize the chances of getting a good death card, but we can still end up with a bad one. It will be useful to have a good death card, but it's not the end of the world if you get an expensive and weak card. It's all just a nice to have. Once you're done, we're going to start our second life. At the very beginning of your second life, you'll be taught about how to use bones. Now every time a card of yours dies or is sacrificed, you'll generate a bone. These bones can be used to summon bone cards that you can collect from events. Bone cards are really quite handy as you'll be able to rely on a completely different resource in order to summon them, allowing you to summon more cards, potentially as sacrifices or as attacking options. After the first battle, the mysterious stranger is going to ask you to get up and get your figurine. Before you do, you need to go over to behind the mysterious figure again and extinguish another candle. So at this point, you should have extinguished 2 candles and the smoke should be collecting in the glass above them. Then go and get your figurine. Before you sit down, have a look at the picture right next to your chair. Does it look like you'll have the cards to recreate that scene? If so, then it might be a good idea to try to do that in this life. We do need to die one more time in order to progress the plot, so there isn't too much pressure for us to do too much on this go. Our primary objective on this life is to break open a caged wolf, but we'll get to that in a second. On your first random card event, pick the cockroach. This isn't the best card in the world, but it does have a great sigil. What this unkillable sigil does is return the card to our hand once it's been destroyed. On this second life, and all the other lives after this, we're basically going to try to collect good sigils rather than good cards. Then we can transfer the good sigils onto our best cards. However, do take a wolf if you can get one, and maybe your death card if it was good and you see it. Since we know we're going to eventually die, rather than put our sigils on our best cards on the second life, we should ideally try to lump our sigils together so that we can maximize the chances of getting a good death card with these lumped together sigils. After a couple of battles, the stone will eventually give you a hint as to where you can find the code for the safe. Once it does, get up and open the safe. Inside the safe, you'll have access to a new card, Stinkbug, which does have a decent sigil. You'll also be able to get a key. Use this key to open the cupboard on the left hand side and complete the 2 top puzzles. You don't need to pick up the cards in these 2 top drawers, and I never do, I just walk away. However, once you finish the first 2 puzzles, the bottom 2 puzzles will unlock. Complete these 2 additional puzzles and we'll definitely want to take whatever's inside. The first thing you'll get is a caged wolf card. We need this card to progress the plot. The second prize is a squirrel's head. It won't make a difference to you in this life, but in your next life, the squirrel head is going to be incredibly useful. Once we have the caged wolf card, our priority and only objective becomes being able to play this card, and it costs 2 sacrifices to summon, and for it to be destroyed. So keep playing along the path, trying to find opportunities to destroy this caged wolf. If you get offered a pelt, just take the free one, don't buy any. If you subsequently have the opportunity to exchange that pelt for a card, see if you can get the mantis. This has a great sigil. A good time to get the caged wolf destroyed, if possible, is against the first boss, which is the Prospector. He has a coyote which hits for 2, so if you can try to play the caged wolf there, the coyote will destroy it in 3 turns. Now you don't actually need to beat the Prospector, you just need to get that caged wolf destroyed. If you do want to beat him, you can skip ahead to the section later in the video for some tips. If you manage to die without breaking the caged wolf, that's fine. Your primary objective will still be getting the caged wolf destroyed. If you do manage to break the caged wolf, either on this life or the next, leave the table and go behind the mysterious stranger after the battle. You'll see that the caged wolf statue has been freed from its cage. Pick it up and place it next to the squirrel holding the knife. This will bring this contraption to life, and you'll be able to pick up the knife afterwards. Now that we've unlocked this knife, we need to make sure we've died twice. If you've only died once, throw your next games picking up good sigils or cheap cards along the way. The second time you die, the mysterious stranger will be wondering where he placed his camera. Pick it up and you'll realize that it has no film. He'll then snatch the camera off you. Follow the same advice as I gave earlier about making your next death card. Once you have, we move on to our third and hopefully final life. At the beginning of your third life, again, the first thing you want to do is to leave the table, go behind the mysterious stranger and extinguish the third and final candle. This is going to give us a greater smoke card against bosses, if we can make it to them without losing a single life. It's free and a 1/3 card. Now if you still haven't managed to free the caged wolf, then that remains your priority. If you have, you'll need to know that we have a knife that we can use now. This is an extremely useful item and we will need to use it at some point in this run. What it will do is essentially give you 4 free points on the scales. Now given its strength, it's a good idea to hold on to it until you absolutely need to use it. This would mean when you're about to lose against a boss or where you have already lost 1 life on a particular run and you're going to lose again. If you haven't died twice and got the missing camera scene, you can still use the knife, but it won't allow you to progress the plot. This third and hopefully final run is going to be the most unpredictable, so don't be too hard on yourself if you don't make it to the end. Luck might just not be on your side. but we're going to try to take steps to make sure you have the best shot possible. I think the single biggest way to improve our odds of winning is to get a good totem. What we'll be trying to do now is to get as many totem events as we possibly can until we get a good totem. Once we do, we can then shift our focus to other useful events. So what's a good totem? Well, there's a couple, and the top 3 involve squirrels. Remember that squirrel head we found in the previous life? We're going to use that to build a totem specifically for all of our squirrels. I've ranked these sigils so you can see what I think, but feel free to experiment. In the S tier, I think the very best totem you can build, and it's a close contest, is to have a squirrel with the unkillable sigil. This is going to allow you to play a squirrel, sacrifice it, and then have it return automatically to your hand. You'll then be able to play it again either as another sacrifice or as a blocker on the same turn. If you can build this totem, it's going to make your life a hell of a lot easier. The second best, and S tier again, is the worthy sacrifice sigil. This will mean all of your squirrels count as 3 sacrifices rather than 1. This is going to allow you to summon some really strong cards like the wolf or a grizzly on turn 1. It also allows you the freedom to take high sacrifice cards on your random card events. The last S tier card, but definitely after the other 2, is going to be the 9 life sigil. Although similar to the unkillable sigil, it does have its drawbacks. It will allow you to summon stronger cards quicker, but it does take up a space on the board, which may limit your ability to react to the opponent. It's still a great pick though. Now in theory, you can get the fecundity sigil, which is the one with the 2 mice, but I've never actually seen it on a totem. If you do manage to get it, then this will probably be the best sigil yet, beating even the unkillable one. What this would mean is, once you play a squirrel, another squirrel is automatically going to be placed into your hand. This would allow you to summon any beast on any turn, and also allow you to have an unlimited amount of blockers, except for maybe against airborne attackers. It would be unbelievably good. Now moving on to A tier, I think there's only one card, and do you know what? It could potentially be S tier 2, which is the Hoarder sigil, which is useful because it will allow you to find your best cards, but it won't increase the amount of sacrifices at your disposal to actually summon them on that very turn, at least not necessarily. If you aren't able to get any of these great sigils for your totem, then you should collect the other tribes heads or try to take some of the lower rated ones on this list. I'd recommend trying to get the wolf head if you can ahead of the other heads, as good sigils for your wolf type cards will act as a workable alternative. If you can get Bifurcated Strike as a sigil on a totem for all of your wolves, this will allow you to have some very strong offensive cards, but you'll still be vulnerable during the run if you get an unlucky draw. Now, if you don't get the totems you're after, then the run becomes a lot harder. Our next line of defense is going to be making sure we have access to good items wherever possible. Items should only be used in emergencies, but don't be shy to use them, as there are going to be plenty of options for you to refill. If you're forced to use even some, you should plan your route to get more, especially further down the path you go. Try to have a good mix of items too. For sacrifices, a spare squirrel or a black goat are good to have, although I'd prefer to have a single squirrel. If you've got a bunch of bone cards, then the pig with 4 bones is also a good shout. The hourglass is a great way to buy you time, as it forces your opponent to skip his next turn. Scissors are a good way to take out strong cards because you can just completely remove them from the board. And the fan will allow your attacks to be airborne, allowing you to avoid blockers. If you're thinking you're going to lose midway through the path, and you still have 2 candles, so 2 lives, it might be worth actually losing rather than using your items. Make sure you know what's coming up in your path, and if you know you'll be able to get items before your next battle, then feel free to use them. If you don't think you'll be able to get them, losing a life might be preferable to losing your items. This is because when you fight a boss, you'll be down to 1 life anyway. If you can beat them, they'll reignite you back up to 2. So if you find yourself in a losing position on your last battle before a boss, it's probably better to give up your chance of getting the Greater Smoke card than using your great items. The Greater Smoke card is useful, but I think your items are more important. Now remember, you will need to use your knife at some point in order to progress the plot. Once you do, at the end of the battle, you'll be offered a selection of eyes to choose from. You must choose the glowing eye. If you haven't died twice, the glowing eye will not be an option. Once you have the glowing eye, you'll need to leave the table and go to the cuckoo clock. Once you open it, you'll have access to a roll of film and a brand new card, the Stunted Wolf. This is a 2/2 card and it only takes 1 sacrifice to summon, making it rather good. Once you have this card, I suggest using all your visits to the campfire to boost this card's attack and defense. If you do have an opportunity to go to the Mysterious Stones, I also suggest transferring good sigils onto this card rather than to a regular wolf. If you can, try to get Bifurcated or Trifurcated Strike on this Stunted Wolf. Not only is it cheaper to summon, there's a good chance this investment will pay off against the final boss. So don't wait till it's too late to use the knife to have access to this card. If you die once you've already got the stunted wolf, it's going to replace the wolf you would normally have at the beginning of a run. That means you'll have a better chance of winning on the very same run you get the stunted wolf, as you'll have both the stunted wolf and an additional wolf that you started with. The last thing I want to talk about is the cards themselves. You don't want to keep getting a load of rubbish cards, as it will reduce the chances of you drawing the cards you want. Try to keep your deck of cards as small as possible, taking events to destroy useless ones and events to transfer sigils. A handful of good cards is going to get you a lot further than a suitcase of bad ones. Another tip is not to go past the backpack event if you've already got 3 items. This will force you to take a rat pack card, which isn't the worst card in the world, but it isn't ideal. Your wolf and or the stunted wolf are going to be doing much of the heavy lifting for offense, and your stoat would be a good defensive option for blocking. I'd also personally avoid getting expensive cards unless you've got the worthy sacrifice squirrel totem. Try to limit your cards to 2 sacrifice summons or fewer. You're going to have a much easier time if you can attack hard and fast rather than harder but slower. So avoid grizzlies and anything that costs 3 or more sacrifices to summon, however tempting it might be to get them. Realistically, if you can get a wolf or a stunted wolf with bifurcated strike, then you're going to be able to end turns in 1 or 2 rounds. Setting up this situation is going to be our best chance for success here. If you manage to get good death cards in the runs before, try to focus on random card events that are not limited to tribes and costs. So you just want to get the ones with the question marks on it. Your opportunities to transfer sigils is going to be more limited than before, so it's important to make them count. Always prioritize getting a bifurcated strike on a wolf or a stunted wolf, as again, that's going to be a recipe for success. Now I can't tell you how to beat each battle, and luck just might not be on your side, but hopefully you'll be doing everything you can to maximize your chances. What I can do though, is try to give you some tips to beat the bosses. A couple of things to note about bosses is that you'll only get 1 life in that battle, so if you do find yourself losing, you must use your items if you have them, otherwise you're going to have to start again from the beginning. Another thing to know is that they will have 2 lives, so you actually have to beat them twice. After their first life, something funky always happens, so we'll need to take some special steps for both rounds. So while the rest of the game favours more offensive play, the bosses will typically force you to be more defensive. That is, unless you've got a bunch of great cards. Anywho, let's talk about the first boss, the Prospector. If you've followed the advice so far, and you're on at least your 3rd life, you'll be starting this match with a squirrel, and if you haven't lost any lives, a card called the Greater Smoke. The Greater Smoke is a free card that will give you some bones when it dies, but it's also a 1/3 card which can do some limited damage. If you're on your 2nd life trying to destroy the caged wolf, we do need to take a slightly different approach. However, you should still have the Smoke card, which doesn't attack but will still be a free card that you can sacrifice. Now I am assuming that you can get to the Prospector without dying once. If you do manage to die, don't worry too much, because even though the Greater Smoke card and Smoke card are useful, they are not essential. The most important thing in this fight is that we don't want to summon our best card yet. That means saving up your wolf or stunted wolf if you've got it. While the coyotes will hit for 2, they only have 1 HP, so they should still be easily removed. You might also be able to kill 2 in 1 hit if you're able to get an overflow hit. There's also a boulder, which should hopefully buy you some time, but we do ideally want to beat the first round, so the Prospector's first life, before that boulder is removed and you start getting hit directly. On your first turn, you're going to need to see whether you can soak up that first coyote's hit. For example, if you have a stoat with 3 HP, if you can, then play the stoat in front of that coyote. If you have it, you can use the Smoke card as a sacrifice or as a blocker, which when killed should allow you to summon a bone card like Stinkbug. Just ignore the mule on the first turn. If you ignore the mule, you should be able to beat the coyote and summon about 3 cards, getting you to the 2nd round or the Prospector's 2nd life, and also damaging the mule because it moves around so that it only has 3 HP. If you're trying to break the caged wolf, then you'll want to try to summon it on the first turn if possible, using the squirrel and the smoke. If you don't have the caged wolf in your hand on the first turn, or the smoke, try summoning the stoat or some other defensive card which should buy you some time and protect against the coyote. Once the caged wolf is open, the rest of the round should be fairly easy as it will be replaced with a wolf, allowing you to hit the opponent directly at least once for 3. Now the next round of the Prospector's 2nd life will see the cards you played being turned into gold nuggets. This can be both good and bad. It can be good because it might buy you some time against this bloodhound and preventing it from attacking directly. It can be bad though if it doesn't allow you the space to summon stronger cards. If you don't have the space or the squirrels to summon a card here, you can either use your items or just take the hit. You should not be using squirrels that you need to block an attack here. Ideally, you've saved up the wolf. Once you're able to summon it, have a look at where the mule is. You'll want to attack the space where the mule will move to on its next turn. Not only will that keep your wolf away from a potential adder coming along the way, it will also make sure you can kill the mule on the turn afterwards, or at least damage it again. This time you can block if you've got a spare squirrel, but since you're going to kill the mule anyway, you can take the hit too if you want. Killing the mule will give you a bunch of cards, so even if you do go down to -4 on the scales, the cards from the mule should allow you to mount an effective counter. Keep in mind though that the hound will move to the latest card played, so if you really need to, you can place your weakest cards last, allowing your strongest cards to attack directly, and with that you should hopefully have the firepower left to beat the Prospector. The Angler is a pretty straightforward boss, but you might want to consider using a knife on him. If you use your knife, you might be better off playing it in round 2, so then you only need to hit him one more time in order to beat him completely. If you're not using your knife, then again, you might want to save your best cards until round 2. But realistically, as long as you have a couple of cards that can hit for 2, then you should be fine. This is one of the few battles where playing defensively might pay off, except if you've got really good cards, in which case just go gung-ho. The way the Angler works is that he steals one of your cards every other round. We can use this to our advantage to block his attacking cards. On turn 1, have a look where the Angler is about to play his Kingfisher. We'll want to play our first card in a different lane. So place your card, but don't play anything else. You should be hitting for at least 1. On his turn, he's going to play another Kingfisher, but only hit you for 1 this turn. What you'll see now is that there's a glowing hook on one of your cards. That means the Angler intends to steal it at the end of your turn. Pick up a squirrel and play it opposing one of their Kingfishers. Then end the turn. He'll hit you for 2 with his 2 Kingfishers, but he will grab the squirrel you just placed and take one of the Kingfishers out of the play. On your turn, you will see that he intends to play a Bullfrog. If his Bullfrog and Kingfisher are on empty lanes, take a squirrel and end your turn. If not, we're going to have to plan ahead. If your placed card is opposite a Bullfrog, but will eventually take it out, then there's no need to worry, you can just pick up a squirrel and end your turn. If it won't survive the fight with the Bullfrog, we should sacrifice it and place another card in the empty lane. So what we want is our card in an empty lane, or our card against the Bullfrog, which it will eventually destroy. On his turn, he'll either hit you for 1 or 2. Then the hook will be back. On your turn, pick up another squirrel and place it in front of the Kingfisher. He'll hit you again for 2, and then steal your squirrel, taking another Kingfisher out of the play. This puts us at a stalemate at -3 or -4. We'll be hitting him for 1, and he'll be hitting us for 1. Or we'll be trading blows with his Bullfrog, who will eventually die. But at this point, 2 of his Kingfishers will be blocked. What we'll need to do now is figure out how to kill his Bullfrog, if we haven't already, and also how to build up our hand. While you don't need to kill his Bullfrog, it probably makes sense to do so, otherwise what you'll need to do is replace your first card with another card which has at least 2 attack. I suggest saving your stronger cards for round 2, as we'll need to be able to kill him in 2 turns ideally. So it'll be good to have at least 1 card that can hit for 2 in reserve. If you have a bone card, now might be a good time to play it. You should have some bones if you started with the Greater Smoke. Place it in front of the Bullfrog and attack. If you need some more cards, what we'll need to do is to draw from our attacking cards 1 turn, and on the turn the hook symbol comes up, draw a squirrel and play it in front of one of your other squirrels. Don't take too much time, as you may run out of squirrels. Once you're able to play a card in front of the Bullfrog and have a spare squirrel if necessary, it's time to beat him and move on to round 2. One thing that's important is that if you're going to beat him on a turn where the hook is showing, do not play a squirrel for him to steal. So let's say, for example, you're going to hit him for 1 and you're already on +4, do not play a squirrel on that turn. Not only will this be a wasted squirrel, it'll also make round 2 harder. Once you've beaten the round, he'll play buckets in front of your cards. So if you had 2 cards played like I suggested, you'll have 2 buckets in front of you. What we need to do now is summon cards away from these buckets. If you manage to summon 2 cards unopposed that collectively hit for at least 3, then this is game over in 2 turns. The Trapper is the hardest boss to give advice for. All I can say is you should make sure you have the stunted wolf by this point. As with most of the bosses, you want to save your best cards until the next round, or at least later in the first round. The way the Trapper works is that he initially has 2 types of enemies, Strange Frogs and Leaping Traps. The Strange Frogs are a 1/2 card, and when they die they become Leaping Traps, which are 0/1s. However, if you kill a Leaping Trap, it will kill its opposing card and give you a pelt. Note that I said opposing card rather than attacking card. If you've got a card with Bifurcated Strike and you kill a Leaping Trap, it will kill the card opposing it, as in opposite it, and take the pelt there. If there is no opposing card to the Leaping Trap, you will not get a pelt. So if you're going to kill Leaping Traps with Bifurcated Strike, I suggest putting squirrels in front of those traps so at least you get 1 pelt and it will destroy the squirrel. We do want to get as many pelts as possible, but I recommend at least 2. And in this battle, do not use your pelts to block. What I suggest is that you initially ignore the leaping trap on the right hand side, as it's blocking a lane and it's quite helpful that it does. Use your Greater Smoke card against one of the frogs, and it will eventually kill it. If you don't have the Greater Smoke, then you're going to have to block with something else that has a chance to kill it. You're then going to want to use your weaker cards to destroy the other strange frogs. However, again, depending on what you have in your hand, you might want to put off attacking the leaping traps until you've got all frogs killed. To do this, use the cards that are opposing the traps to summon other cards, then attack the other strange frogs. If you can keep this up, you'll eventually be facing 4 leaping traps, or at least 3 leaping traps, and all your attacking cards on the empty lane. Once you're in this position, focus all your efforts into attacking the empty lane. Remember, the traps prevent there being any overflow damage, so don't try to be smart in thinking you can attack the trap and the card above it. Once you're in a position to consistently attack the opponent directly on one lane, we now need to prepare to get some pelts. The plan is, on the hit where you think you can get the scales to +5, we're going to try to hit as many of the other traps as you can with your weaker cards. This will win the round and get you the pelts without having to deal with any of the top row cards. Bear in mind though that the cards you use to attack these traps will perish. You'll probably need to prepare ahead for this with some spare squirrels, spare weak cards, and hopefully one strong card for the next round. Try to delay the final blow if you need some more time. For the second round, so second life, you'll be able to use the pelts you gathered to buy the opponent's cards. If we manage to get most of the pelts, we're going to be in a strong position, and we're going to want to hit him for 5 in the next turn. You should try to buy as many of the cards on the bottom row as needed so that you can have space to hit him for 5. Make sure you remove all the cards that will potentially jump over to block your attack too, for example a mole man. If you don't have too many attacking options, you can also take a grizzly from the trapper's top row, provided you've got the 3 sacrifices needed to summon it. Once you've emptied up the space to hit him, and got the cards to do so for at least 5, pull the trigger, and then we move on to the next boss. It's hard for me to give advice on the last battle. It really will depend on the cards you managed to get on the run, and the preparation we made up to this point. However, you will get a chance to get 2 boons before you fight him. These are going to be special superpowers that you can have to help you fight him. If you want a hint on how you're guaranteed to get at least 1 boon, look closely on the table and you might find a clue to help you in your next run. Good boons are things like Magpie's Eye, which will allow you to pick your best cards when you draw a card. Ambidextrous is another good one, as it allows you to draw 2 cards instead of 1, increasing the chances of you getting a good card. I'd really not recommend you getting Boon of the Forest. This is going to fill up all of your spaces with forests, and this defensive approach isn't particularly helpful on this battle. What's going to happen is that Leshiy will cycle through the power of his bosses, which can either help or hurt you. The first is the Prospector on his second turn. This is going to destroy the cards you've played and turn them into gold nuggets. This can be helpful if it's done in a way that blocks the opponent, but it won't buy you too much time. A couple of turns later he's going to use the power of the Angler, and you can use squirrels to block his best cards just like we did with the Angler before. Finally he'll turn into the Trapper, giving you an opportunity to buy good cards and make space to attack him. However, we don't really want to cycle through too many of these. Ideally you want to hit him hard and fast. Now is definitely not the time to be shy with your items if you've got any. On the first turn he's going to have a Mole Man who blocks for 6. I think there's a strong chance that you'll draw the Stunted Wolf too. The Stunted Wolf is one of my favourite cards, and if you've managed to level him up and get him a good sigil, then he's going to be great in this fight. If you're able to, I recommend holding on to Stinkbug, as she'll be super useful in the third round. If you can't beat the Mole Man in the first turn, then try to end the turn so that it at least blocks the incoming Amalgam, or at least have something in front of the Amalgam which will survive its attack. Your cards will turn into nuggets after the second round, so you'll need to plan the first 2 attacks in advance, so that you don't end up losing your best cards straight away. Beyond this advice, I'm afraid you're on your own though. We've done all we can to prepare for this fight ahead of time, and if you don't get the cards, then you just don't get the cards. However, I think the game is generally quite generous when it comes to this fight, and I think you'll probably be fine, especially if you go in guns blazing. On the second round, Leshiy will play some death cards. These usually aren't anything to be worried about, especially if you manage to play some strong cards. On the final round, you'll be fighting the Moon. This acts like a regular card, but it'll be hitting all 4 of your lanes at once. Don't waste your time trying to block with squirrels or rabbits, because they will be removed. If you've managed to get Stinkbug in your hand, this is where they shine. This will prevent the Moon from attacking, so you can actually take your time to summon your best cards without worrying about being hit. If you have a card with the Touch of Death sigil, like the Adder, then this will be a one-hit KO. You should be fine on this round, it's not too difficult, but just try to use all 4 of your lanes. And good luck! If you manage to beat the Moon, then you'll have finished the act. Congratulations if you made it this far. If you have, you'll be able to watch some videos, and then you'll be taken to the back room again, where you'll take out Leshiy with his camera. While this does feel like a tense scene, you don't actually need to rush. He'll just stand there like a dodo if you don't pick up the camera. And you guys will struggle for an eternity until you finally take the picture of him. Once you do, pick up the new game symbol and you'll need to go back to the start menu and start a new game. This will start Act 2. Now, if you're watching this video because you are struggling in Act 1, I sincerely suggest you stop watching now. As much as my YouTube channel needs the watch time and retention, this game does become a lot more forgiving, if not downright easy beyond this point. This is because there is no longer going to be any significant consequences for losing like there is in Act 1. So I'd recommend trying it out for yourself and experiencing the rest of this great game unspoiled. However, if you really want to keep watching, I'd be happy to have you on board as we move on to Act 2. Act 2 is probably my favourite part of the game. There are 0 consequences for failure here, so you can relax. The first thing you'll need to do is select a deck from the 4 options offered. The first 2 decks will be familiar to you. Grimora's deck uses bones to summon cards, and Leshiy's deck will use sacrifices and squirrels just like in Act 1. The 2 new decks are Energy and Magic. I'll explain how those 2 work later. All of these decks are viable options, and you can always expand and tweak your cards later. If you really want the quickest and easiest option, I'd recommend Grimora's deck. I think these bone cards are the best in the act, and even if you don't pick her deck, there's a good chance you'll have a bunch of these types of card by the end of the act. I don't recommend Leshiy's deck for 2 reasons. The first is you just spent a whole act primarily using beast cards, and so purely from the perspective of variety, I'd recommend trying something new and fresh. Secondly, it's probably the most challenging of all the decks. Things work differently in this act, and so not only will you have to relearn some approaches, you won't necessarily have the best cards either. So unless you're really looking for a challenge, I'd recommend not taking this one. Energy and Magic are both decent options, but you'll need to learn how these cards work. Energy is a good pick, but you'll be playing with these types of cards a lot later in the game, so don't feel like you're missing out if you don't pick it now. The Magic deck is my personal recommendation. Magic cards aren't necessarily the greatest in the world, but the reality is this is basically the only time in the game that you'll get to use them. So purely for the variety and the opportunity, I'd go for this option, especially if this is your first playthrough. It's up to you though, and remember, your deck will be filled with all 4 of these types of cards anyway, so you don't need to overthink this decision. Once you've picked your deck, you'll discover the world map. Leshiy's island is on the top right, Grimora's on the bottom right, Magnificus, the magic scribe, is on the bottom left, and PO3, the energy scribe, is on the top left. You'll need to be either Leshiy or Grimora before you have access to the energy or magic islands. Just like in Act 1, we need to prepare to improve our chances for success. You won't always have the best luck when it comes to cards, but we can try our best to mitigate against that. The first thing you should do is walk towards Leshiy's island, but before you go into it, turn to the pier on the left. Once you're at the pier, press tab to see your deck and press the autocomplete option if you haven't already. Once you have, you'll find a clover next to this pier which you can pick up. The clover will allow you to reroll your first hand, and it's a very useful mechanic to have. You could have got the clover in Act 1 if you managed to complete the photo frame challenge, but to be honest, it wasn't massively important in the first act. The second thing you should do is collect free cards. The more cards we have, the merrier, as it will allow us to diversify our deck and to hopefully have some stronger options than just our basic start. Go to Leshiy's island and open the crate outside for some cards. Then go inside Leshiy's cabin and complete the puzzle wardrobe at the top of the room. After you've got those cards, leave Leshiy's island and go to Grimora's island. Open the coffin on the right hand side to get even more cards. Now it's time that we actually had our first fight. You'll want to head over to Leshiy's island for this. Now we're not going to have too many cards right now, but it will still be helpful to manage our deck. To be honest, you can just autocomplete as it does a somewhat good job of picking the cards, but if you've got the time and understanding of what you have, it'll be better to select them for yourself. For the first fights, it doesn't really matter what you have, but if you manage to get a Mantis God, then that should always be in your deck. The first thing we need to do is to fight Leshiy's minions. You need to go inside to talk to Leshiy. He's going to give you a camera to take a picture of a bunch of things. We then need to find the code to his safe, which shouldn't be too hard to find, and if you've got good memory, you'll realise it's the same code as in Act 1. Once you've opened the safe, you'll be able to take a picture of the Prospector's dog and fight the Prospector, who is your tutorial battle. In Act 2, there are a couple of differences to battles compared to the first act. The first difference is that you only have one deck. There is no separate deck now for squirrels. This is what makes taking Leshiy's deck harder. You have no control over whether you pick up a squirrel or an attacking card, making the battle harder to plan for. The second difference is that you now have access to a hammer. In Act 1, you couldn't remove cards from the board unless you sacrificed them. Now you can simply use the hammer if you want to create space on the board. This will usually give you a bone too, but be careful if you use this on an explode bot however, as it will explode killing the cards around it. Depending on which deck you picked, you'll get a little tutorial on how to use their cards. For Bones and Beasts you already know what you're doing, but I feel like the energy cards could have been explained a little better. To use energy cards, we of course need to use energy. During a battle, if you look at the top left hand side, you'll see 6 batteries, but on your first turn only one of them is filled in blue. If you've only got one battery filled up, this will allow you to summon a card that has an energy cost of 1. Each turn those batteries fill up with 1 more, so on round 1 you'll get 1 battery, and on round 2 you get 2 batteries, and on round 3 you get 3, and so forth, all the way up to round 6. This will happen irrespective of what you play. So if on round 1 you play a card that costs 1 energy, on round 2 you'll still get 2 energy to spend. This means there isn't any need to save up energy, as it won't increase the amount of energy you get in the next round. Moving on to magic cards. If you played Pokemon the trading card game, hopefully this will be a little bit familiar to you. In order to play magic cards, we first need to play Mox cards, which are just like energy cards. There are 3 colors, Emerald, Sapphire and Ruby, just like Gen 3 Pokemon. Playing a Mox will allow you to summon certain magic cards, but some will depend on the color and some won't. This is great because in theory you might be able to play 3 attacking cards on round 1 with just a single Mox. On the other hand, if you don't have a Mox card, then you won't be able to play anything. Be careful as some cards will automatically be destroyed if the Mox card that's been played is also destroyed. Now I can't tell you exactly how to play as the cards you're going to get will be somewhat random. What I can say is that as you build your deck, you're going to want to have a mix of all 4 types of cards, but focusing still, as we did in Act 1, on lower cost cards to summon. I'd suggest having at least 3 cards of each type in your deck if possible. For beast cards, the Mantis God is the best, Wolf Cubs are good, and Warrens can also be good shouts if you need the sacrifices. For bone cards, there's a bunch of great cards. The Tomb Robber is good as it allows you to generate skeletons for bones, and once those skeletons perish, they'll leave more bones so you can regenerate skeletons again. Bone Heap is another good card. It's a free summon and you can use bones to make him stronger, so it's more useful in later turns. Revenant is another good card. It hits hard but is brittle, and the Skeleton Magus is similar but it does require a Mox to play. Energy cards are a mixed bag. I'd probably take 2 cheap ones and 1 expensive, so maybe a Leap Bar, a Sentry and then a Double Gunner. Since energy is a resource independent to other resources, they can be really useful to get additional sacrifices. I also quite like the Gambler Bot, but there might be better options from the other types of cards. For magic, I think it's preferable to stick to a particular colour of Mox, rather than using multiple types. That is unless you've chose the magic deck, in which case you're more or less forced to at the beginning of the act. In either case, early on in the act, I think it's still best to focus on Sapphire cards, as they have some good offensive options in the Gem Fiend. However, as time goes on, you might want to switch to the Emerald type cards, as they have some potentially very heavy hitters like the Stim Mage or the Ghoul Mage. Another thing I want to mention is excess damage. If you score more points than you need to in this act, you're going to get foils, which act as a currency here. For example, if you only need 1 point to win and you hit the opponent directly for 2, then you'll get 1 excess damage as a foil. You can use these foils to buy more cards, as each island has its own trader. Therefore, where possible, try to maximize excess damage. Right, back to the game. Remember, nothing bad happens if you lose a fight. You get to try again immediately if you want, or you can try to change your deck. Don't forget to use your Clover if you get a bad hand. I'd recommend beating the Prospector and Angler on Leshiy's Island first. Each time you beat a minion, they'll give you a pack of cards, which helps. Once you've beaten the Angler, go to the left and take the cards from the crate. Rather than going inside Leshiy's cabin to fight the Trapper, who can actually be quite a tough minion, I suggest you go to Grimora's Island instead. On Grimora's Island, beat all 3 of her minions and collect the cards in the crate on the top right. Now that we've collected as many free cards as possible, you should be in the best position to fight the Trapper. After beating the Trapper, we have to fight either Grimora or Leshiy. It's up to you which one you go for, but typically I go for Leshiy. Leshiy can be a bit fiddly. He's going to use his camera to take pictures of cards that died to make death cards. This only includes cards being destroyed or hammered, not those being sacrificed. He'll take the cost of the first card that dies, Then he'll take the power of the second card that dies, and finally he'll take the sigils of the third card that dies, just like in Act 1. However, I'd recommend trying to be quick in this battle, but not too quick. Sorry, I know that's not a particularly helpful statement, but ideally you'd want to beat round 1 and have him only take the cost of the card. It's detrimental to you if you beat him without having had a card destroyed, or for the first round to drag on too long. He's going to start the battle with a 2-1 Coyote and a 1-2 Otter dropping down. If you can roll a Mantis God in your hand, then that will be a great start. You do need to take out his Coyote first, but if you have a free blocker, like a Mage People or a Mox card, that will be ideal to block the Otter. It will die, but it means Leshiy will take the cost of a free card for his death card. Now it's just a matter of beating him, which will depend on the rest of your cards. What's probably more important to focus on though, is what cards, if any, will die next. Ideally, you'd want it to have some attack, not another Mox card. It would be better to take from hits from the Otter and Coyote rather than have a 0-1 card used for the death card. If you know you're going to end the round on your turn, make sure you play your best cards. You don't want them sitting around in your hand. This is because Leshiy will destroy your hand and replace them with his newly created death cards. On round 2, Leshiy will start with a Mole Man already on the board and a Grizzly on the way. If you manage to get free death cards, you're going to want to fill up the entire board with these as blockers. Ideally, you'll also want to block the Grizzly by making the Mole Man jump to that space by attacking you. If things go your way, you should have decent death cards that will allow you the time and opportunity to take him down. And if you don't, then don't worry, just try again. After you've beaten Leshiy, the other 2 islands will open up to you. The first thing you will be doing is collecting free cards. Go to the Magic Island and get the free cards from the crate on the ground floor. Then go to the Energy Island and get the free cards in the bin and open the 2 puzzles. You now have a choice in which order to do the next tasks. You can either beat all the minions on the Magic Island and then on the Energy Island, or we can just complete the entirety of the Magic Island. This is because Magnificus, the Magic Scribe, is one of the easiest bosses ever. But first, a side note on a way to really cheese the game. Once you get to the second level of the Magic Tower, you'll be faced with a dummy. This dummy doesn't attack you and can be battled again and again. This allows us the opportunity to make a game-breaking card. I'm talking about the Ouroboros. This is a card that you could actually get in Act 1, but since it's a rare card, there was no guarantee that you'd ever see it. However, you'll always have the chance to purchase it in Act 2 from the trader in Leshiy's cabin for 8 foils. The Ouroboros is a 2 sacrifice card that has the unkillable sigil, so when it dies, it'll return to your hand. The way it works is that it starts as a 1-1 card, which is pretty poor for a 2 sacrifice card. However, every time it dies or is sacrificed, it permanently becomes stronger. Permanently. That means once it dies for the first time, it permanently becomes a 2-2. Then if it dies again, it becomes a permanent 3-3, and so on and so forth. Now this could have been useful in Act 1, but it would require time and the opportunity to level it up, neither of which are exactly abundant then. But in Act 2, this dummy allows us to create an artificial opportunity to level it up with no risk. Basically, against the dummy, we're going to want to keep drawing cards until we get the Ouroboros. Then summon it and use the hammer to destroy it, at which point it will permanently be a 2-2. Then if you do that over and over again, summon it and then destroy it, summon it and then destroy it, in a minute or 2 of doing this, you'll have one of the strongest cards in the game, if not the strongest card in the game. You can actually speed up the process of doing this by using the Tomb Robber or the Necromancer card, but these aren't necessary. All you need is time. Anyway, this guide was made on the assumption that you wouldn't use this game-breaking card, but feel free to use it if you want. Let's get back to the guide. Whether or not you decide to beat the minions on the Energy Island or not, the next boss you should fight is Magnificus on the Magic Island. We need to clear our deck out first and fill it with free cards, so things like skeletons or mage peoples. Then we need to fill it up with brittle cards like the Skelemagus or Revenant. And finally, we need to fill it up with cheap cards starting with energy ones, so like Leap Bots. Then we can move on to beast cards like the Wolf Carb or the Mantis. What will happen in the boss fight is Magnificus will replace all the sigils of your cards with something else, meaning our brittle skeletons will no longer be brittle, but rather free 1-1 cards. And our mage peoples will not be gem dependent, but again free 1-1 cards. What this allows you to do is to spam your way to victory. Completely ignore his Mox card and just keep placing cards in the other 3 lanes. Given enough time, you'll win this battle easily. After you beat Magnificus, beat the minions on the Energy Island if you haven't already. Then it's time to either take on Grimora or PO3, although if you've got some spare foils, then PO3 is a little easier. The battle with PO3 is a bit interesting because he has a conveyor belt system. On each turn, all of the cards will rotate clockwise. This can create a dangerous situation where your best cards could potentially become his cards if they rotate enough clockwise. Also, at the end of round 1, he'll scan your best card to battle you with. This can create a very scary scenario where he's either one hit killing you, or at the very least destroying all of your cards. The strategy I think works best here is the skeleton system. I've actually amended the strategy I'm using in this guide as it works so well in my playthrough videos. And one of the reasons it works is because PO3 will eventually run out of cards, and he runs out quite quickly actually. And once he does, you have this situation where the board is completely empty with no reinforcements coming. Now to get to this situation, we're going to want to fill up half our deck with skeletons. These can be bought from the trader at Grimora's Island for 1 foil each, so hopefully you should have some money left, but realistically you only need about 10. But before you spend your money on skellies, make sure you have the Stim Mage or the Bone Heap or the Gore Mage, one of them, one of these heavy hitters. If you also have a Mantis God, then even better. If you're low on foils, you can also get some extra by fighting the dummy again in the Mage's Tower. Now all we're going to do in this battle is spam skellies. As I mentioned earlier, I suggest about 10. Then try to fill up the rest of your deck with a Mantis God if you've got one, a Bone Heap, a Stim Mage, which means you're going to need an Emerald Mox, and you can get a Gore Mage. Then some brittle cards like a Revenant or a Skelemagus, at which point you should be fine. Now if you spam him with skellies, not only will we be able to destroy his cards, we'll also be able to score some points. Importantly, if you're going to win the round, you need to destroy your cards before you do. Then you'll have an empty board and we can use some heavy hitters like Bone Heap, Gore Mage or the Stim Mage, and you'll be late enough in the game that you'll have the bones, you'll have the energy to power these guys up and finish him off no problem. Grimora is a little tricky and it pays to be a little defensive at first with her. I'd suggest blocking the right lane with the Sarcophagus until you are able to have a card that can kill both it and the Hound together, or whittle her down while you continually block that lane. You want to block that lane because that Sarcophagus will turn into a 3/3 Mummy Lord if you don't, and that's a tough card to defend against. If you can get a Wolf Cub or a Mantis God, that will help as you can outscore the Hound while it blocks the right lane. You'll then want to build up to a position where you can save some good cards in your hand before taking her out. This is because she will destroy your placed cards and then place them back in your hand as free blockers after round 1. If you can get some late game heavy hitters again like the Gore Mage, Stim Mage, Bone Heap, you should hopefully have the bones and energy to hit for at least 2 or 3. If you can, then you'll have no problem finishing her off as well. And with that, you'll have finished Act 2. Just go back to the middle island, follow the instructions, and I will see you on the other side. Right, just one more act to go. We'll be playing exclusively with energy cards now. Hopefully you learned how to play with energy in Act 2, but if you didn't, I'll repeat what I said earlier. You'll need to use energy to summon cards. You start off with 1 max energy and every turn that increases by 1. This is irrespective of whether you used any of it or all of it in the last round. So if you have 1 energy in round 1 and you use it to summon an empty vessel, then the next round you will still have 2 energy to use. Max energy increases every round until you get to 6. So after round 6, every turn you'll have 6 energy to spend. Because energy builds up over time, we're going to be forced to play very defensively in this act. This is in direct contrast to Act 1, where offensive play was better rewarded. So here, we'll need to defend at the start of battles with cheaper cards just to block attacks. Once we've built up enough energy to summon stronger cards, we can then mount a counterattack. This counterattack usually culminates in us being able to summon the double gunner, but I'll talk about that later. In this act, we'll have access to 2 decks again. One deck has your attacking cards in it, and the other just has empty vessels. Empty vessels only take 1 energy to play, but they're 0-2 cards. There are only a handful of attacking cards that cost 1 energy, and you don't start off with them. So at the beginning of the act, your first moves will almost always be the same, that being playing an empty vessel to block an incoming attack. There are also now 5 lanes as opposed to 4, but that doesn't make too much of a difference to be honest. Have a look at the 4 starting cards that you'll have at your disposal. I suggest keeping all of these cards for the rest of the game. You will have the opportunities to increase the amount of cards you have, but I suggest not exceeding 10 in total. 9 of these cards will be your core cards, and you should keep an extra one that you can basically treat as disposable. Again, since the pool of cards you have at the beginning of the act is so small, your opening moves for the first part of this act will be the same. Play an empty vessel to block an attack, pick up another empty vessel, and then play the energy bot. The energy bot costs 2 energy, but will give you 1 energy back. That allows you to play another empty vessel after you've played the energy bot. So your second turn will be to play an energy bot to block an attack, and then to play another empty vessel to potentially block another attack. Remember to play the energy bot first, otherwise you won't be able to play both cards. On your third turn, you'll be able to play either your shield bot or sniper bot, or you might need to block with another empty vessel. The shield bot is a 1/1 card that can withstand an extra hit. This makes it a very good defensive card to buy some time or to block against explode bots. The sniper is also a 1/1, but it can shoot anywhere on the board. After a couple of more turns, you'll be able to play your double gunner, your best card for now. This is a 2/1 card with bifurcated strike. This means it can hit for 4 if you place it right. However, by the time you can actually play your double gunner, you should hopefully have a clear plan on how you can win the game. Excess damage is important in this act too, as just like in the other acts, excess damage can be turned into money you can spend. We do need to spend money in this act, so try to maximize your excess damage if you can. In Act 3, you'll be traversing the world map, which has the same layout as the world map in Act 2. That means as a start, you'll want to first head over to where Leshiy's island was in Act 2, which is the top right of the map. After that, you'll want to go where Grimora was on the bottom right. After that, you would want to go where Magnificus would be on the bottom left, and finally to where PO3 was on the top left. You'll be traveling by using the directional arrows on the edges of your screen. There are also some hidden arrows which will only appear if you hover your mouse over them. Along the way, you'll encounter checkpoints. These replenish your items and allow you to fast travel. If you die, you'll drop your money Dark Souls style and be teleported to the last checkpoint. Don't worry too much about dying, as it's usually very straightforward to go back to where you were, get your money back and to try again. With that out of the way, let's start our journey. We want to go to the top right hand side of the map. On our way, we'll be given the opportunity to select a card. Generally, I like to take cheaper cards that can do some damage. However, another double gunner is a great choice, and so is Sentry, and that doesn't do any damage at all. We'll soon also get our first item, which is an energy canister. This allows you to fill up to your max energy again, but do not get confused. If you're on turn 3 and your max energy is 3, this will only recharge you back up to 3, it won't give you the full 6. If you keep going along the path, you'll eventually get to an upgrade power-up, which looks like a small ID card. You will need to remember this symbol, as it's going to be important for our run. This is going to allow you to add a sigil to one of your cards. Generally, we'll want to give this upgrade to our cheapest cards, which is either going to be an energy bot or a sentry if you have one. If you're lucky to get a bifurcated strike as a free sigil, I would still suggest giving it to your energy bot or sentry. Now this might sound like a strange crazy move, given they can't attack, but it will make sense later, I promise. If you don't get bifurcated strike, other options like sharp quills or an extra shield are a good shout. Once you make it to Central Botopia, the first checkpoint, make a note of where the shop is, as you'll be coming back here multiple times. It's 2 steps downwards from Central Botopia checkpoint. Also, once you're in the shop, take note of how expensive the next sigil upgrade will be. It's usually going to be about $10, but do not get it at this point. I repeat, do not get it at this point. We want to save this upgrade for later, but just because we're not buying it now does not mean we shouldn't still be trying to max out our money. As you leave Central Botopia, we're going to need to go right towards Eastern Botopia. Cross the bridge, and on the other side will be a secret way to go down. This will allow you to skip the next fight. Keep going along the path and you'll get to another bridge. As you cross the next bridge, you'll get another chance to pick up a card. The same rules apply, try to get cheap attacking cards. Remember, we'll only want to get 10 cards in total. At this point, you should only have about 6. Feel free to use your canister on the next fight, as there's a checkpoint straight after this. Once you reach the Eastern Botopia checkpoint, you'll be asked to get up and get a battery for PO3. Before you do that, however, you must open the 2 puzzles next to PO3. The first puzzle will give you a bomb detonator. This will fill up all the empty space on the board, including the spaces on the opponent's side of the board, with bombs. You can then use your hammer to explode them all. Don't end your turn, use your hammer. The second puzzle is tricky, so I'll give you a little clue. The square symbol with all the gems in it is a gem detonator card. What this means is that while this card is alive on the board, the gems around it will act like bombs, destroying everything opposite it and adjacent to it. Once you've opened this puzzle, you'll get the Lonely Wizbot, our new favorite card. This card is our best chance for success. We are going to spend the rest of the game just trying to upgrade this card with 2 sigils: Bifurcated Strike and Unkillable. One or the other, or both if possible. But every time we're going to try to upgrade this card, because if you can get a Bifurcated Strike on the Lonely Wizbot, it's going to be as good as a double gunner, but only costs 2 energy to summon, as opposed to the 6 that you'll need to summon the double gunner. Now that we've got our bomb detonator and the Lonely Wizbot, you can, if you really want, go to the left of the table and the cuckoo clock will appear. If you can figure out how to open it, you can get your Ouroboros back. Still permanently upgraded from Act 2. To be honest, it's not too hard to figure out how to open this clock. On my first playthrough, I actually opened it by accident, so I would just try thinking back to other acts and what worked on the clock, and you know what? You'll probably find it by accident. The rest of this guide will assume that you haven't picked it up, as it is still game breaking, although it does cost a full 6 energy to summon. As you walk to find the battery, make a note of the crate there. You don't need to open it, but there is a card inside if you ever need it. Later in the game, you have events where you need to exchange one of your cards. These are little recycle signs. If you love all of your cards and don't want to give any of them up, come back to this crate, get this card so you have a spare card to exchange this one instead. Right, let's move on. Once you get the battery, you can sit back down again. If you can afford the $10, travel back to the shop in Central Botopia using the fast travel system and buy an upgrade for the Wizbot. Again, ideally we want to get a Bifurcated Strike or Unkillable on the Wizbot. But if you don't get these, you can use the upgrade on another card if you want. Each card you have can hold up to 4 sigils. The Lonely Wizbot already has one, so you can only add another 3. Once you finish upgrading whatever you want to upgrade, take a note of how much it will cost to get another upgrade. We're going to come back here and try again for the Lonely Wizbot at the next checkpoint, provided we have the money. After you're done in the shop, go back to Eastern Botopia and go up. Once you reach a T-junction, don't bother with the red symbol on the left, just go right. You'll get another opportunity to take a card. Just remember to keep an eye on how many cards you have. We don't want more than 10. Now, the longer you go without getting killed, the more likely you are to run into bounty hunters. These are really annoying and tough cards that are just out to get you. Given how tough these guys can be, there's a good chance you might get killed. But if you do, just rest easy as it reduces your chance of meeting them again anytime soon. It should also be pretty straightforward for you to go and find your money again too. After your first battle, you'll get access to your first beast upgrade. This means one of your cards will alternate between the regular selves one turn and a stronger beast the next turn. Use it on your energy bot or sentry to turn them into a wolf. If you've got Bifurcated Strike on your energy bot, this means that every other turn it will hit for 6. See, I told you it would pay off. You're going to have access to a couple of these beast upgrades for free, but you can also buy them in the shop. I don't recommend using it on the Wizbot as he's strong enough already. If you keep going, you'll be met with a gold card for a couple of bucks. I'd suggest taking it as it might be a good card. You should hopefully be up to 10 cards by this point, so no more after this. If you see any more events offering cards, just ignore them. If you keep going, you'll then have to exchange one card in order to proceed. Get rid of your worst card, obviously. After this, you'll get another opportunity to make a beast card, choose another cheap or weak card, and the battle after this second beast card is going to be the last one before a checkpoint. So make sure you use your items if you need to. Once you get to this checkpoint, again, if you've got the money, travel back to Central Botopia and try your luck again with the Wizbot. After you're done with your upgrade, take a note of the new price and return to the checkpoint. Now it's time to face your first boss, the photographer. He will give you the opportunity to take photos at the end of each turn. Then, the turn after that, you can revert to the situation taken by that photo. Ideally, we'll want to take a photo where we're doing a lot of damage on the next turn without taking much in reply. On the first turn, place an empty vessel and end your turn. On the second turn, pick up an empty vessel and place it and then end your turn. This is going to result in you being hit for 3. On your next turn, use your bomb detonator, which should lay out 5 bombs. Then use your hammer to destroy the bombs and the opposing shutterbugs in the process. You should then have an empty board with 3 energy to spend. At this point, play your strongest card. You should get at least 2 turns to hit them without reply. If you could play one of your beast cards, that would be ideal. What will happen is that it will attack, transform, and then you can take a picture. Take a picture of you hitting your opponent for more than it hits you, and where possible, where you hit it for 5. Use your canister if you need help achieving this. Then revert back to that picture the next turn. This should at least get you to the next round. If you're hitting hard and take a picture, you may want to hold off playing another strong card. This is because if you revert back to the picture, you'll lose that strong card that you played in the process. It would be better to save your strong card until after you reverted. Then you can save it for the next round and hit him even harder. If you can get to a position where you're going to hit for at least 5 to win the first round, do it. Take a picture, then revert on the next turn and hit for 5 again to win. Once you've won, your items will be replenished. You'll get some money and a free upgrade for your empty vessels. You can choose from Mighty Leap, so protection against airborne attacks, Sharp Quills, so if something hits your vessel then you'll take 1 damage of them, or Armored, where it gets an extra shield. I would suggest taking Mighty Leap, as we don't really have any other protection against airborne attacks at the moment. Once you're done, and if you've got the money you know what to do, go back to the shop in Central Botopia and try to upgrade the Wizbot. If you have all the sigils for the Wizbot then great, but if not, keep trying. You can also buy a Beast upgrade if you feel that'd be a better option or if it's cheaper. Next, we need to go south from the Eastern Botopia checkpoint. Cross the bridge to the south and keep going straight down. After the second battle, you'll come across an exchange event. Before you do the exchange, go to the secret way on the left. That's going to lead you down a path and you'll get a bunch of money. Then come back to the exchange event and switch out your worst card again. After the exchange, you're going to get a cheap upgrade option. Try again for your Wizbot if you need to, but if not, whatever you feel is best, although I'll still recommend upgrading your cheapest cards. Crossing the bridge to the east will be the last battle before a checkpoint, so use your items if you need to. I hate to repeat myself here, but if you have the money at the checkpoint, go back to Central Botopia and try to get an upgrade for your Wizbot. Then come back. You'll next be entering a building and see an electricity sign event. Ignore this sign completely. It'll be an upgrade for a card of yours, but if that card dies, then it'll be gone forever. This event, this power-up, is just not worth the risk. Go to the room on the left and then go up to the battle on the top. This is the only battle you need to fight before you reach the next checkpoint, so use your items if you need to. Once you win, there's going to be a well, which will give you a quill and some money if you keep using it. Go back to the room with the electricity sign and go up. Then sign the dock, and at the checkpoint, if you've got the money, go to Central Botopia, try to buy an upgrade for your Wizbot, then come back. Right, time for another boss, the Archivist. He is going to ask to see some real files from your hard drive. If you've got the time to prepare, try to remember where you have some really large files. I'm talking gigabyte large. And also some really old files. Don't worry if you don't have any, we can use the files from the Inscryption game itself to help us out. When you start, just skip the first turn without playing anything, and take the hit for 3. Then play your bomb detonator and use the hammer to detonate all the bombs. You're going to be asked to give a large file. If you do have large files, then great, just use those instead. However, if you don't, you should hopefully have a game called Inscryption installed on your computer. Go to wherever you've got Inscryption installed, and inside that folder, you should have another folder called Inscryption_data. Inside the Inscryption_data folder, you'll be able to find a file called resources.assets.res. This file is about 2 gigabytes. Use that file, and then you'll be asked for a second file. Again, go back to the Inscryption folder, then to the Inscryption_data folder, and you can find another file called sharedassets0.resource. If you use those 2 files, you should be able to beat round 1. You're then going to be asked to provide an old file. If you've got an old file, great, but if you don't, just give it any file, it's all the same to me. Now, on round 2, this just becomes a regular fight. He's going to have 2 skellies coming your way, and you should still have 1 empty vessel in your hand. So on your turn, you can pick up another empty vessel and block both those skellies. The turn after this, you're going to have 4 energy to use and a largely empty board, so you shouldn't have too many problems wiping up. If you need to, use your canister, but this should hopefully now be a rather straightforward affair. Once you're done, you're going to have another opportunity to upgrade your empty vessels. I suggest taking Sharp Quills, but they're all pretty useful sigils. Now guess what I'm going to say. If you've got the money, go back to the shop in Central Botopia and see what you can do. Once you're done, we're going to head west from central Botopia. After the first fight, you'll get to the end of a bridge where there's a recycle sign. Take the secret option to go up. This will lead you on a path to get a free upgrade. You know the drill. If you need to, try the Whizbot. Then come back to the recycle sign and go south. After the second battle, you'll get to a checkpoint. Go to the shop if you need to, then keep going south. Eventually, you'll be asked to get up to get the gem piece. There's nothing special to do here other than to complete a couple of funny puzzles, so go ahead and get it and sit back down. Once you do, your empty vessels will now act as mocks, the energy type cards that we saw in Act 2 for magic cards. You'll get a couple of opportunities to gemify some of your cards in a bit. What this means is that if you've got an empty vessel with emerald mocks, your gemified card will have extra HP. If you have a ruby mox, then that gemified card's attack will be higher, and if you've got a sapphire mox blade, the gemified card will be cheaper to summon. What I like to do is to make half the vessels ruby and half the vessels sapphire. We're going to gemify our Whizbot, Energy Bot, and other good cheap cards. We don't necessarily need these cards to be less squishy, but it will help if they can hit harder or be summoned quicker. Once you're done, go west. You'll get a gemify event which looks like a circle, a triangle, and a diamond. Gemify the Whizbot. Then take the secret option to go west again. Then take the secret option to go south. This will give us a free option to upgrade. You know what to do, try the Whizbot. Now come all the way back to the bridge and head east. Gemify another card, maybe your Energy Bot or Sentry Bot or another cheap card if you've got one, and then head east again. After the battle, you can gemify another card. Again, cheap cards or your beast cards. Once you're forced to go south, you'll find the first generator event that you need to deal with. These aren't battles exactly. What you need to do is attack the opponent directly for 12 within a set amount of time. Don't worry about getting hit unless it's going to destroy your cards. Just focus on hitting the opponent directly. Getting hit directly won't make the count go down. In this particular battle, there's nothing to hit you anyway. Once you're done, you'll be forced to recycle another card. Choose your worst one and be on your way. The next battle will be the last one before a checkpoint, so use your items if you really need to. For the first time, I am not going to tell you to go back to the shop in Central Botopia. That's because if you go up, you'll have access to another shop you can use. Upgrade the Whizbot if you still need to, then go upstairs. After the first battle, you'll have another opportunity to gemify a card. And after the second battle, you'll reach the checkpoint. Travel back to Central if you need to, and once you're ready, come back for the third boss. This boss is going to ask you to set some rules. What I recommend is you set the rule that every time a card dies, the opponent plays a leap bot. Then on your very first turn, use the bomb detonator and explode all your bombs with your hammer. What this will do is leave your opponent's side full of leap bots. As leap bots can't attack, this allows you to keep drawing cards and ending your turn without getting hit. Keep drawing cards until you max out at 6 energy and have a double gunner in your hand. Once you do, have a look at the top row and see where the weakest card is. If you play a double gunner now, it's going to kill one leap bot to the left and then one to the right. The space on the left is then going to be filled up with a leap bot, but the space on the right will remain empty. Then a top row card will drop down into that space and hit you. Plan which top row card you want to deal with and then position your double gunner so that its second attack hits the space you want the card to drop down to. On your next turn, play a somewhat weak card to deal with that top row card. Maybe a shield bot, for example. After a couple of turns, cards will stop dropping down that lane, and you'll have the opportunity to attack your opponent directly. Slowly but surely, this will lead you to round 2. On round 2, you'll get to decide another rule. I suggest going for whenever a card dies, a random card is played. The round starts with some bombs being placed in front of your double gunner and the other card you played. Now is the time to play your best cards, and ideally hit him for 5 in one turn. Use your canister if you have to. While it's going to be hard to keep up with whatever's happening since so many random cards are going to be played, this should still be a fairly easy exercise. You'll be getting 6 energy a turn with plenty of cards in your hand. It shouldn't take you too long to finish this boss off. After you're done, you'll get another upgrade to your empty vessels. I suggest taking the Sentry Sigil with all decent options. Once you're done, head back to Western Botopia and then head north. Only one more bus to go, As you head north, you'll see a free upgrade for your empty vessels. I think you should probably just take this, but it doesn't really make too much of a difference, to be honest. We'll need to fight a couple of times, climb up some towers, and move some satellites. You will be forced to exchange one of your cards, but I suggest you do this before you see the Spanners event. The Spanners event will allow you to create a card, and it's up to you whether you want to take this. You can make some decent cards, but you will need to trade something in. The Spanners event creates another opportunity to make another game-breaking card. What you need to do is make a card that has no cost, has the unkillable sigil, is a battery bearer, so it gives you a battery like the energy bot does, and is brittle. What you end up with is the card that will give you more energy than it costs. So what you can do is play this card for free, and then you'll get an extra energy. You can then hammer it and play it again, and again, and again. You'll be getting extra batteries each time. This is unlimited power from turn 1. With this card, you'll be able to play your double gunner and any other card in your hand on turn 1. So yeah, it can be pretty game breaking. Or you can just make a regular card, it's up to you. You are forced to make an exchange soon, so bear that in mind. Once you're done with the satellites, go to the middle of this little complex and beam up. And here's where you're going to be forced to make an exchange. Remember, if you want to avoid exchanging some of your best cards, you can get up and get a free card from the crate inside next to where you got the battery earlier in the act. There's also a free card near one of the satellites. After this exchange, you'll reach the last checkpoint. After the first fight, you'll get your last free upgrade. And if you haven't managed to upgrade your Wizbot by now, then you might as well put something on it by this point. You'll then face your last generator battle upstairs. You have to move the dish, and you'll get another opportunity at a Spanner event, so you can make a card if you really want to. When you're ready, it's time to fight the final boss of the act. Go to the shop and spend all your money. You won't be needing it after this. Now there's no real strategy for this fight. Hopefully you've already got a bunch of great cards at your disposal. You may receive a card at some point in the battle. This is either a card that another player has made, or you might get a Mummy Lord. Either way, it should be a fairly easy battle, and you don't really need any particular advice for this one, other than to try to block the strong cards from dropping down by moving the mole. After you've won the first round, you'll be given an opportunity to make a card. Make a good one, as you might end up using it yourself. I think a 1-cost 3/1 card is a decent option, or a 4-cost 3/3. If it's sent to someone and they use it and win, then this battle will end here and now. However, if they don't win, or they don't use it, or you just don't connect, you can use that card you made for yourself. Provided you can already hit for 2, then using this card you just made should allow you to win fairly quickly after that. And that will be the end of the act. Just follow the instructions and have a great time. And there you have it. Hopefully you've enjoyed this guide on a quick and easy way to beat the entirety of the game Inscryption. I mean, I say quick, it should take about 5 hours or so, but hey ho. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. If you want to watch me play the game in its entirety, I'll leave a link on the screen. And all that's left for me to say is thank you ever so much for watching. This is a great game, and I really hope you have a great time playing it. Thanks again, and I will see you next time. Take care, guys.